2022. My name's Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of Administrators, and I welcome those present in the gallery this afternoon. Thank you for spending some time with us. I'd like to start by introducing my colleague panel members. Firstly, Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
And Mr Cameron Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon.
And we're joined today by our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Patterson, and our executive team, Marion Gregg, Acting Director, Customer and Business Transformation, Steve Coldham, Director, Corporate Services, Michael Jansen, Acting Director, City Planning and Infrastructure, and Colette McMahon, Director, Community Life. We're supported this afternoon by Simon Horsburgh on AV and Tracy Taylor, our Governance Support Officer, and there are a number of other officers here present this afternoon, and I welcome them also. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community history. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Those in the chamber today would have noticed the rainbow flag flying outside. The flag was raised today on Tuesday the 17th of May to join our LGBTIQ+ community, family and friends to proudly celebrate the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Intersex Phobia and Transphobia Day, Ida Hobbit Day, as it is commonly known, to raise awareness and celebrate diversity in our municipality and renew our organisational commitment of inclusion and respect for all. This year, the City of Casey will be developing an LGBTIQ+ action plan, and that will strengthen our commitment to inclusion and explore ways we can further celebrate and embrace diversity in Casey while ensuring human rights are defended and protected. So if you're interested in hearing more about those plans or in joining one of Council's inclusive community reference groups, please make contact with Council and ask to speak to a member of the Inclusion and Wellbeing team, and I know they will be very keen to welcome your contribution. I now move to item 2, the confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes of the Council meeting held on the 19th of April 2022?
I'm happy to move those.
Mr Belmar, thank you. And a seconder?
Chair, I'm unable to second. I was an apology for that meeting.
I will second that. Thank you very much. So I'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2022 and have no conflicts to declare. Do any of my colleague administrators or council officers have any conflicts to declare?
Chair, with the first item, I declare a personal interest in that I am a member of the CCL board.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. We'll note that. Item 4 is public question time, and we have no questions submitted for the council meeting this afternoon. So I now move on to item 5, officer reports, and I move to item 5.1, which is the Casey Cardinia Library Strategic Resource Plan 22-23 and Draft Budget 22-23. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move that item.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
A seconder, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, please speak to the item.
Thank you, Chair. In moving the suite of documents tonight, I am mindful of the continuing service that CCL is continuing to provide and has provided over the last 12 months during difficult times that involved obviously the response to the pandemic. When reviewing the documents for this evening, I'm mindful of the declaration I've made that I'm also currently the chair of CCL, and I want to thank all the staff of Casey who have worked with me as also being representatives on the CCL board, and in particular I want to pay mention to Steve Coldham, to Kerry New, and also I want to make a particular mention of Bernard Rowan, who until early this year was also a member of the CCL board. But focusing on our library services, I want to note that we have given notice that later this year we'll be changing the corporate structure of the library, but despite that, the library will continue to provide services to the community, and I want to assure the community that with the leadership of Beth Lupino, CCL will continue to provide a very high quality service at its libraries, which are at Bunjil Place, at Cranbourne, at Doveton, at Endeavour Hills, at Hampton, and at Pakenham, Emerald and Cardinia. And in particular, I want to note that the documents that we are adopting tonight include references to the fact that the continuing provision of services means that there is continuing to be an improvement of those services and a continuing commitment to provide those services at a high level and to renew the services and to renew both the collection and to continue to renew the facilities that are required to provide a high quality library offering. I note that the documents point out the fact that we have around 100,000 members of CCL, and we have a collection that numbers over 1 million items. So this is a library that is functioning well, will continue to function for its life in its current form, and will continue to function in a very high way in the future. I want to pay tribute also to the staff that have been working with the library to continue to offer a very high level of service, noting also that they provide often a first point of call to members of the community who require assistance with things that you might not consider are offered by a library, but they provide assistance with reading documents, with access to the internet, and with ensuring that our community, our Casey community, which is sometimes one which does not have access to some of those items at home or doesn't have knowledge of how to use those facilities, libraries are the place where people often turn for that kind of assistance. So with those comments, I want to assure the community that the library will continue to function at its high level and be available to the community for the future and ongoing.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, if I could briefly make some comments and commence by thanking Mr Belmar for his commitment as Chair of CCL and to Mr Coldham and to all other directors of the corporation, the leadership and the contribution that both Mr Belmar, Mr Coldham and the other directors are making at the moment as the corporation goes through an evolutionary stage is substantial and does need to be acknowledged. And along with Mr Belmar's guarantee, which is not just a throwaway line, it is a very sincere commitment that there will be no disruption to any of the services or any of the facilities or community access to the libraries within both municipalities during this period. We are, of course, adopting the budget for 2022 and 23, the Strategic Resources Plan and the Library Plan from 2021-2025, in addition to the Facilities Development Plan, which I would like just to make some specific reference to, because I think if we go to page 38 of the public documents, which is section 8 of the plan itself, under the objectives and desired outcomes, it is very clear to me, and I would trust to users of the library and to members of the community more generally, that the offer and the services that the library provides on a much wider scale is perhaps underestimated and perhaps not as widely acknowledged as it could be. But with over 2 million customer interactions in a 12-month period, the objectives around being a place to gather and to learn, to ensure that there is ongoing partnership innovations to achieve the shared goals, which supports other councils to make decisions in investment in their services, which we are doing tonight, and also to provide organisational excellence to make sure that the offerings are contemporary, they're up to date, they're meeting the community expectations, and that there are more varied pathways for the community to get involved in utilising the facility, either to borrow learning and other resources or to use the meeting rooms for community functions, is I think, best practice in the case. And you only need to go to the library to see, particularly the one at Bunjil, to see what an exceptional facility it really is. So having reviewed the library's plans and their commitment to providing ongoing and exemplary service to their customers and to the wider community, I'm very pleased to support the budget appropriations and the adoptions of the plans as put, and again acknowledge the service of all directors, particularly Mr Belmar as the current chair, as the corporation goes through a further iteration of its structure, and ultimately that will be concluded in good time. So with those comments, I'm pleased to second the recommendations as put, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I support the recommendation also. Libraries are just such an integral and accessible part of the service offering of council, and as a panel of administrators we do have a very strong commitment to the provision of library services, and we have some extremely high quality library services which we'll continue to invest in the coming years. So with that, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.2 is the Casey Design Excellence Program, and I seek a mover for the recommendation.
Chair, I will move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, I invite you to speak to the motion.
Chair, I'm absolutely delighted to move the recommendation to adopt the Casey Design Excellence Program, which has three components in its offering. And to do so, to really give credit to the team who has been involved in putting together what I think is not only a leader amongst Victorian municipalities in creating a culture of excellence in design principles, and to give clarity and certainty to the developed community and those involved in creating better amenities and facilities for Casey. Not only, as I said, for Victoria, but for the whole country, and I'd even go as far as saying that this document, or the suite of documents, has an international application. I've had the privilege throughout my career to visit and to be a witness to a number of the cities internationally mentioned in the document, such as Copenhagen, London, certainly their development of the Olympics precinct down in the Docklands, Amsterdam, The Hague, with the development again of the Docklands and the waterfront area, and Singapore, of course, the Marina Bay area. Of course, I worked for the Hong Kong government for over 10 years in the development of the old Kai Tak Airport, West Kowloon, and if we look a little bit closer to home, even Melbourne Docklands, when we were first deciding back in 1996 what was going to happen to the Docklands, all of which had an overlay of creating excellence in design principles to try and improve the amenities for communities, not just living there but working there, but visiting there, and to try and capture all of those aspects so it makes it a much more attractive place. And the one thing that really struck me around this policy, which I relate to my professional experience, is that the foundations and the principles is not just designed to make our lives easier, but there is a genuine and sincere intent to make this place, this city, much more livable, much more accessible, much more economically vibrant, much more interesting and exciting for all members of the community and anyone who may be having the opportunity to visit Casey. Specifically, the benefits that the three suite of documents, which include the Casey Design Excellence Signs, the establishment of the Casey Design Excellence Panel and the Casey Design Excellence Award, is there to ensure, as I've said, better design process of the projects, and this combined with some of the master plan activity that we are undertaking in Cranbourne and in fact in this precinct, and to give confidence to the developed communities that there is clarity and consistency over developer-led proposals, and also how we are dealing with planning applications on a general sense. It is critical that we do this under the principles of excellence in design, which these suite of documents absolutely and clearly articulate. There is also the intent to have improved community pride, to have safety. We've talked about design and safety as being a hallmark of what we're trying to do as a municipality. And again, it is a clear message that is articulated and presented very strongly within the suite of documents that this is a guiding principle of how this organisation makes decisions. There's a sense of belonging, there's a stronger design culture within not just this organisation but the active engagement of the design and developer community and also broader industry groups to contribute to these decisions, which ultimately will lead to better decision making. There's also the intent to have capacity building, to empower everyone within the organisation and external partners to really champion these principles and to be advocates and to be leaders to influence better outcomes and to really have that sense of pride and that sense of place that in parts of this municipality is very clear. It goes without saying that the building that we're meeting in at the moment, Bunjil Place, has won a number of international awards. The 2019 International Architecture Award. There's literally dozens of other awards that this facility has won, which not only sings the intent of what these suite of documents are trying to achieve, but it actually shows that the organisation is not only committed to meeting these objectives and these benefits, but has a track record in doing so. And so I think that if we look at the 10 commitments that are in the excellence framework itself, which include design that leads, design that puts sustainability first, designing a city for people, design for all, design for the place, design that makes sense, design for the future, design that inspires, design processes that work, design together. It really does give that clarity to every aspect of the process to get better outcomes. And hopefully, from a community perspective, it is recognised as Casey yet again leading the state, and I would, as I said, go Australia-wide and internationally to really be true to its word of being a strong leader and particularly a thought leader in these type of policies and principles. We do have the Archibald Prize exhibiting and touring here at Bunjil Place, which is a nice segue to talk about the Casey Design Excellence Awards, which I think to look at really acknowledging some of the local contributions within the municipality is something that I will personally be very interested in. I'm sure my fellow administrators will be as well, because if we can create that sense of excellence and participation and, importantly, acknowledgement, it will go a long way to delivering the process and the policies as a whole. Chair, it is a wonderful opportunity tonight to really acknowledge the work that's gone into this extraordinary high quality document, and I say that very genuinely. Certainly Michael Jansen, who's Acting Director, who's here tonight, but two members of his team, Trevor Griffin, who's the Manager Sitting Designer Construction, and Yodi Baju, who's the Team Leader Urban Design, who were instrumental in developing and delivering this suite. I really do want to pay a tribute and acknowledgement to them and for their work to having the vision to provide what really is a game-changing suite of documents. I think there's a sense of excitement in the future of Casey, and it does go a lot to the enthusiasm, the professionalism and the genuine intent to make this municipality a better place over the longer term that clearly comes through what we're discussing tonight. And from our perspective, it frankly makes our job that much more easier to have such professionalism, leadership and commitment, and knowing that there is the confidence to be true to these principles, to work with all aspects of the design, the creative and the developer community, and fundamentally deliver a much better result throughout all these processes, which will benefit the community as a whole. Again, I do acknowledge the great work that's gone into this. Very proud to move this suite of documents, and with those words, Chair, I do thank the team once again.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Boardman has made an excellent submission in introducing this document. There's really little for me to say other than to commend the documents, to note the excellent work that's gone into putting together, noting also the quote in the documents from Jan Gell, the urban planner, that a good city is like a good party. People stay longer than really necessary because they are enjoying themselves, and ultimately that's what good design's about. It's about creating a place that people enjoy, that people want to be in, that people want to spend time at, and it's fantastic to see the City of Casey undertaking this sort of work to ensure design excellence in this community, and to show leadership in a space where it's not just other municipalities or other communities that lead with design. Casey is showing that it wants to do it and it can do it as well. I'm mindful also that these can be great statements of intention, but they need to be put into action. And the documents do so because included in the suite of documents we're adopting tonight is the implementation plan. And I note that they show both a short-term goals that include part of the implementation, and part of that obviously will be getting these suite of documents out into the community, and also into the medium term, ensuring that the design community is aware of the goals that Casey wants to achieve, and ensuring that these documents are out there in the developer, not just in the developer community, but in the wider community, ensuring that a sense of good design and a sense of place is part of what Casey is known for. So I'm very pleased to be seconding this motion tonight, and I want to thank all those that have worked on the documents, and I note as well that it is very high quality work, and like any good design or like any good documents of this nature, they aren't telling people what to do. They are showing a direction, giving people space within which to do, good design, a space within which to exhibit their abilities, and that's what any good document of this nature will do. So with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I too support this work, and it is leading edge work. I think the things that stand out for me most particularly are that the design issues are people-centred, and I think we've seen that already in evidence in the work that's being undertaken in the city. And I note particularly there's some fantastic images of a number of facilities within the city of Casey, but there's one in particular that we have spent a little bit of time in, and that's at Cranbourne West Community Hub. And the example there is, I think, a great example of this piece of policy work in action. You know, the hand-cleaned recycled bricks, the incorporation of a range of environmentally sustainable elements to reuse of water, careful use of power, but also the incorporation of spaces that are very much people-centred and people-friendly. So it's already happening at the City of Casey, it's already in action, which is great to see, and this sets another high standard and a high bar. So thank you both for your endorsement, and thank you. I support the acclamation of officers' work in this regard. I will put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3 is Casey Growth Areas Payments from Reserves May 2022. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I will move this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and a seconder.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Chair, this is really a procedural motion in many respects. I've reviewed the documentation and am satisfied that it's appropriate that the CEO or his delegate make the payments that are required. The public open space contribution has been collected, and the appropriate work has been done to ensure that that it is now paid out of, and I'm happy to, in that case, move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, likewise, I have reviewed all the attachments and the process has been adopted, including the public consultation, consistent with Section 173 agreements, and are satisfied that the process meets statutory obligations, and I'm pleased to second the recommendation authorising the CEO to make payments generally in accordance with what has been provided to us. There's obviously a confidential attachment to this, which is quite appropriate in the circumstances. Having reviewed it, this is a proper process that has been undertaken and is consistent with our expectations.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is Heritage Overlay Planning Scheme Amendment for 75 Tuckers Road, Fernley. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, this is a proposal from the developer. The amendment has been made at the request of the developer Balcon Group Proprietary Limited. concerning the Fernley Homestead, which is situated at 75 Tuckers Road, Clyde. It's currently a recognised heritage site under the Casey Planning Scheme. It's protected by Heritage Overlay, which is listed in the recommendation. The recommendation is seeking endorsement from us to write to the Minister for Planning to seek his authorisation to prepare Amendment C288 within the Casey Planning Scheme, to incorporate all significant elements within the Heritage Overlay boundary, to also seek an exemption under Section 21 of the Act from the notice of requirements under the Act, and also subject to authorisation from the Minister of Planning to give notice of the amendments in accordance with the requirements under Section 19. The reason we're doing this is that there are some, as I understand, anomalies within the current mapping of the site, which do not include aspects of primary and secondary heritage that is sufficiently within the current planning scheme amendment to protect the setting and the cultural value of the place into the future. Whilst this is a statutory process, there is a requirement and expectation from Council that we will protect the heritage associated with the Fernley Homestead, which will include the farmhouse in its current form, its materials and detailing in the farmhouse representing the form and the construction of its time, the long driveway, the below-ground domed water tank, which features a hand pump, the well to the rear of the house, and a number of other matters that are listed in the public documents. Whilst this is a statutory process, the overall intent is to ensure that the planning scheme amendment be undertaken to correct the boundary so that all of those aspects of primary and, importantly, under this proposed amendment, the secondary heritage considerations are protected, and the developer undertakes their commitments to do so commensurately. So, having reviewed the proposal and understanding the necessity for this to come before us, I agree with the recommendation as put, and are pleased to move it, and to therefore authorise contact with the Minister for Planning for him to comply with the statutory process applicable.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second this motion. The comment I would make, Chair, is I'm mindful that this is an amendment to a heritage overlay, and it's an excellent example of the continuing work that can always be done to improve protections of this type, and noting that the curtilage now will also protect a stand of trees in the driveway, which in many respects it's the approach to a building of this type which is just as important to protect as the building itself. And I think it's an excellent example of this type of work, of these types of studies, and I commend the work, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is contract extension recycling process services. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move
Thanks,
this.
Mr Belmar, and a seconder.
Second, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. This is a motion, as it's set out in the notice papers, to approve an extension for 1 year and to authorise the CEO to exercise the remaining options to extend if they are required. And the extension is with the Cleanaway Group. I note also that the papers point to the fact that Council plans to go to market later this year, either through Recycling Victoria or as an individual council with respect to procurement of recycling services. It's appropriate that this motion be passed to ensure that we're able to always comply with our recycling obligations, and I note that the excellent work that's been done by our officers in this space, and I commend them in their work, and am hopeful that a permanent solution will be able to be arrived at, and in the meantime this is the appropriate way forward.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, we have discussed at previous council meetings and in some detail internally the current work of the Metropolitan Waste Resources Recovery Group and the proposal to deal with collection and waste management recycling in the future. It is a matter that is fundamentally top of our attention insofar as its implications to the municipality and all residents and ratepayers into the future, but there is obviously a significant regional, if not statewide, matter that also needs to be dealt with. Whilst this is a contract extension, while that parallel process continues, it is entirely appropriate to do that. And as Mr Belmar has articulated, there is an intent later this year to go to market through the process that is currently being undertaken, and having reviewed the evidence around the contract extension whilst the parallel process continues, it is with a degree of confidence that I second the recommendation put, and are very much looking forward to receiving ongoing updates as to the parallel process, because it is an exceptionally important aspect for this municipality and our neighbours. With those comments, I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And the last item on the public agenda this afternoon is item 5.6, the cleaning of council buildings and other facilities. And there's a detailed recommendation on page 172 of the council papers for this afternoon. Do I have a mover?
I will move that recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
I'll second that.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, this is a supplementary report which concerns contract CT 000729, which was a tender process that was conducted in March of this year. It deals with cleaning contracts for council facilities, including Bunjil Place, kindergartens, libraries, other buildings and public toilets and barbecues. The tender was conducted on the basis of receiving applications from the industry to deal with all or part of the office, and a total of 14 submissions from different contractors were received. I have reviewed the evaluation report that was provided by the tender panel and the methodology that was applied in the process, the scoring and the diligence and probity that was clearly evident in the process, which has resulted in the awarding of those contracts to a number of service providers, which I won't name at this stage. They are in the reports. But by saying that, Chair, it is an important function of council that we obviously keep our facilities clean and to community expectations. And this is not dealing with the performance management, it is dealing with the procurement aspects. And as we have discussed a number of times at past council meetings, that procurement it needs to be at a gold standard, and I'm very confident in this situation that has occurred, and for that I'm pleased to accept the recommendations and endorse the findings accordingly.
Thank you. And Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I join Mr Boardman in thanking those that have worked assiduously in ensuring that an appropriate tender evaluation has occurred. I also am mindful that there were 14 proposals received, and any good tender process requires multiple tenderers, and I want to thank those members of the business community that have applied, that have joined the tender, and at an appropriate time the successful tenderers will be notified. But as I said, any tender process, any procurement process requires that there be competition, and it is pleasing to see that has occurred, and that a selection criteria has been applied, and I have considered the documents and am happy to second this motion tonight, noting the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes the officer reports for this afternoon, and I will move to item 6, consideration of reports of committees. There are a number of items of record of discussion in the agenda papers, so we note that record of discussion as listed. Item 7 is petitions, and there are 2 petitions received for the council meeting today. The first is item 7.1, which is off-leash dog area at Sweeney Reserve, and there's a recommendation that the City and Asset Planning Department write to the head signatory and provide a response to the matters raised. Could I have a mover for that recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second the recommendation.
Do you want to say anything to the recommendation, Mr Belmar?
Very briefly, I've noted what the petition is about, and I think it's appropriate that council consider the matters and that an appropriate response be given to the issue that's arisen, which is specifically about Sweeney Reserve and an off-leash dog area. That's an issue that is properly addressed by the experts within council.
Thank you. Mr Boardman, anything to add?
No, nothing to add on this matter, Chair.
Okay, I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And item 7.2 is a second submission, and that's with respect to traffic light installation at Golf Links Road and Narry Warren Cranbourne Road. There's a recommendation once again that the City and Asset Planning Department write to the head signatory and provide a response to the matters raised in the petition. Do I have a mover for that recommendation?
Chair, I'll move that recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder? Mr Belmar?
Second that.
Mr Boardman, did you want to?
Chair,
to say?
I briefly acknowledge that the proponent and submitter of the submission is the same as item 7.1 as just discussed. 7.2 is dealing with the traffic lights. A request, I should say, the traffic lights being installed on the T intersection of Golf Links Road and Narry Warren Cranbourne Road. Contained within the petition is some assumptions around traffic flows and potential safety matters. It is a matter that is appropriately dealt with by referring this to the City and Asset Planning Department to consider the veracity of the request and to provide specific advice accordingly. We do thank members of the community for providing petitions and for highlighting issues that the council needs to address, and it is an appropriate process for this to be brought to our attention, as equally as appropriate it is for us to refer it to the most logical and qualified area within the organisation to provide a detailed response, and I'm very confident that that will occur.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar, anything to add?
I just want to thank those members of the community who have engaged with us through this petition, and note that matters of traffic management are those that are amenable to expert consideration, and it's appropriate that the appropriately qualified people within council consider the matter and respond.
Thanks, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 8 is urgent business, and there is none this afternoon. And item 9 is pursuant to some confidential matters that the council need to consider, and so they fall within section 3F of the Local Government Act. So with that reference being to personal information which if released would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. So we will now move to closed council. I thank those of you in the gallery for attending this afternoon and for the officers' support, and we shall officially close the meeting and move to closed council. Thank you and good afternoon.